April 1st, 2026. Ushuaia, Argentina, the southernmost city on Earth. The MV Hondius pulls away from the dock. 150 passengers from 23 countries. People who paid between 14 and 22,000 euros for 33 days. Antarctica, the Atlantic, islands most people only know from maps. Not a vacation, a dream. Now let me tell you what that dream became. 3 passengers dead, 8 infected. And for days, not a single country was willing to let this ship near its shore. The ship's doctor, the only doctor on board, got sick himself. This is a story about a virus most people have never heard of, but it's even more a story about how one person's fear becomes the fear of entire nations. Let's start with how the virus got on board. A Dutch man, whose name authorities haven't released, spent 4 months travelling through South America before boarding. Chile, Uruguay, Argentina. A real field trip. Mountains, wilderness, birdwatching in places where civilization ends and something much older begins. He returned to Ushuaia from Uruguay just 4 days before departure, and he was already carrying something he had no idea about, because this virus is silent. It enters quietly and waits. Andes Hantavirus. That's what came aboard with him, and let me explain what that means, as a doctor, in plain language. Most hantaviruses spread in only one way. A person contacts a rodent or its droppings, inhales dust from an old barn where mice lived, touches contaminated surfaces without gloves. That's enough. And then, nothing further. Rodent to human, full stop. But the Andes virus is the exception in its entire family, the only known hantavirus that spreads between people, the only one out of dozens of strains. And it was the one that ended up on the Hondius. What does it do in the body? After infection, silence. 1 week, 2, sometimes 6, or even 8 weeks. The person looks healthy. They walk around, eat, talk, hug, and then, suddenly, fever, muscle pain, shortness of breath. The virus attacks blood vessel walls, damages them, and fluid begins leaking where it shouldn't be. Into the lungs. The person essentially drowns from the inside. Medicine is nearly powerless against this. There is no specific treatment. There is no vaccine. Only supportive care, oxygen, fluids, a ventilator, and hope. The fatality rate runs between 20 and 40%, depending on how quickly it's diagnosed and how well equipped the hospital is. For comparison, COVID-19 without treatment was under 1% across the general population. The Andes virus kills at a rate dozens of times higher. But, and this is critical, it does not travel through the air in a crowded room. It doesn't fly on droplets across 3 meters. It requires prolonged, close, sustained contact. The kind of closeness that exists between family members, between people sharing a cabin for weeks on end. April 6th. The Dutch man develops his first symptoms. The ship's doctor examines him and sees nothing alarming. April 11th. He dies. The first death on board. The official line is measured. Age, underlying conditions. People grieve, but the cruise continues. Nobody understands yet that this is not the end. April 24th. St. Helena, a tiny British island territory in the middle of the Atlantic, the same island where Napoleon was exiled over 200 years ago. The man's body is removed from the ship. His wife disembarks with him, visibly exhausted. 2 days later, she dies in a hospital in Johannesburg. Now there are 2. A couple who shared a cabin. May the 2nd, the diagnosis. Andes Hantavirus. For an infectious disease specialist, this sounds like something from another reality. This virus kills people in the mountain regions of Patagonia, but on a ship, person to person? A 3rd passenger dies on board. A British passenger is evacuated by helicopter in critical but stable condition. And only then do the remaining 150 people on board finally understand. Their cruise ended a long time ago. There's one detail I consider the most significant from a medical standpoint. The ship's doctor got sick, the only doctor on board. And then an American oncologist, a passenger who bought this cruise as a vacation and brought a camera, not a stethoscope, stepped forward. For weeks, he coordinated medical care on a ship that had no scanners, no ventilators, no sophisticated equipment of any kind. Just oxygen tanks, anti-inflammatory drugs, and everything he carried in his memory after 20 years of oncology practice. That is the human center of this story, not the statistics. One man who decided not to step back. The ship heads north, Cape Verde, 3 days anchored offshore. Nobody can organize a safe evacuation of that scale. All eyes turn to the Canary Islands, to Tenerife. But the president of the Canary Islands, Fernando Clavijo, makes a public declaration. I cannot allow this ship to enter. Residents rally behind him, and their fear is not irrational. Tenerife is an island where tourism is 70% of the economy, where people remember how COVID-19 didn't just kill people, it killed entire seasons, jobs, small businesses. Their reaction is not panic, it's hard-earned experience. Madrid ultimately overrules the local government, citing international law and humanitarian principles. And while Spanish officials argue, the word pandemic is already burning across social media. This is where I need to stop, because this is exactly where fear and facts split in opposite directions. The WHO confirmed the outbreak on May 4th, 7 infected, 3 dead. May 6th, an 8th case, in Switzerland. A passenger made it home to Zurich and only then fell ill. The CDC deployed a team of epidemiologists to the Canary Islands, but both the WHO and CDC say the same thing. The risk to the general population is low. The Andes virus doesn't ride the subway. It doesn't walk into a cafe. 8 infected out of 150 people living in a closed space for weeks on end. That is not the mathematics of a pandemic. But the incubation period of up to 8 weeks means that passengers who disembarked in April, before anyone knew what was happening, are already home in their own countries. They're being tracked. Most are almost certainly healthy. But I'll be honest with you, that is still an open question, and we don't have a final answer yet. May 10th, 5:30 in the morning. The Hondius enters the port of Granadilla in Tenerife. Passengers disembark in full protective gear, masks, head-to-toe suits, medical tents on the dock, buses to the airport. American passengers are headed to Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, then to the National Quarantine Center at the University of Nebraska. A Norwegian air ambulance is on standby at the runway. Spain's health minister calls the disembarkation protocol unprecedented. The body of the 3rd passenger who died remains on the ship. The Hondius will continue to Rotterdam for decontamination. Why did this story become so loud? Not because of the virus, because of us. After COVID-19, we became different people. We learned what R0 means. We know what exponential growth looks like. We have already been burned, and so when any combination of virus plus ship, plus deaths, plus no country wants them, appears, our minds already know where that road can lead, even when this time it leads somewhere else. The fear of Tenerife residents is legitimate. The fear spreading across social media is understandable. But the ability to tell panic apart from precaution, that matters more right now than almost anything else. Here is what this story actually revealed. First, medical standards on cruise ships are outdated. One medical bay with oxygen tanks and over-the-counter medications for 150 people on a month-long Antarctic expedition is not enough. Second, there is no international protocol for receiving a sick vessel in port. Every country responded differently. Cape Verde was paralysed. The Canary Islands said no. Madrid eventually said yes. And between those answers, critical days passed. Third, a potential incubation period of up to 8 weeks is a real epidemiological problem that we have not yet solved. The Andes virus hasn't gone anywhere. It lives in Patagonian rodents and has for thousands of years. It doesn't plan pandemics. It simply exists. And when a human enters its territory, it sometimes crosses over. The question isn't whether it's dangerous. It is dangerous, profoundly so. The question is whether we are ready for a world where people travel to Antarctica, where expeditions go deeper and closer to wild nature than ever before. We expanded our world, and nature responds the way it always has, with its own rules. After COVID, we know how fragile that balance is. That's exactly why the Hondius is not just this week's news. It's a reminder that preparedness is not paranoia, it's responsibility.